We have Josefina Ayerza, editor and publisher of Lacania Inc., and Alain Badiou, and hopefully you will introduce Alain for us. So we're going to have a lecture, and hopefully there will be a few minutes at the end for questions. Thank you.
So the sound works?
Good.
Okay. I'm going to take my jacket off before I start talking. Okay. So let me thank you all for coming, and a special thanks to Jacques Tilton for hosting this event. Much as we miss him, Jack had to attend urgent matters in China, and this is how he's not here tonight. Again, many thanks to Janine Cirincioni for her actual help with putting it all together. This is Lacania Inc.'s 18th year of existence. Today, we are launching issue 30. The general subject is Objet A. The objet A is not unseizable, says Jacques-Alain Miller in his article published in this issue From Another to the Other. Objet A is captured especially in the phantasma, and it is denuded in perversion. There, where surplus jouir is unveiled in a naked form. As far as structure is concerned, the place to find this petit objet is certainly the phantasma, especially to the extent that the subject is not represented in it. Not a visualization of the sort that comes together with awareness. The phantom image emerges when you're not expecting it, and it vanishes after having produced its effect. The paradigmatic phantasma in Freud is, of course, a child is beaten. In family romances, he foresees the situation where daydreams are used by the child to avoid the Oedipical conflict by imagining himself to be adopted, to be really the child of a king or a queen, or a king and a queen. With Lacan, the matter is always a question with the other sex. Since there isn't reciprocity, because the other sex, as such, for both, is the feminine sex. With him, the hysterical loans her body to another woman. If the classical masculine phantasma is to fantasize with another woman while making love, also women fantasize with another man or with other men, but they can go as far as to have this other man make love to another woman. That is to say, that she offers her body as the body of somebody else. And this is a very hidden thing. Her man, her husband, doesn't even know that each night he makes love to another woman. Now, this object as stand-in is the same as appears in the work of art. It is nevertheless worthwhile not to confuse art with phantasma, or to say that what the artist does is to picture some phantasma or other. The reason is that the work of art addresses itself to the eye's hunger. And this is the phantasma, and this the phantasma simply does not do. If the painting draws you into its space, this is because there is a void within it, like the hole in the potter's creation, and this void exerts an attraction on you. You know that with Lacan, it was the potter. He started with this idea of the potter. The problem is, how do you recognize the existence of a gap or a void? What assigns it? The case is the look as object. The look that is in the field of the painting marks the place where the void is in the painting. This structure can usefully be applied to the question of anxiety. It is relevant to a discussion of art to attempt to connect desire to terror, because Rilke said that beauty is the edge of a terror. And Lacan repeated the point in his seminar on anxiety. More of a self-representation, the phantasma is something like a mirror image, or the way you see yourself when you have an image of yourself in your mind. With Lacan, a representation competes with the world of appearances, and this is what art does not do. Everyone knows that Plato had little sympathy for art, and not simply because poets had tended to represent the gods performing actions which were not worthy of imitation. As Lacan stated, Plato objected to painting, not because painters gave an illusory equivalent of objects, but rather because they were competing with a world of ideas, of forms. When you are in a state of self-consciousness, the character who resembles you is said to be your representation in this other space. If painting and other art forms function according to something that stands in for the representation, the first thing we may say is that you will not be seeing yourself in the work of art. It is in the absence of this representation that you will seek what is standing in for it. This idea should be extended to the point of saying that the painting is not representing even the model that it resembles. It is surely important that the spectator be moved by the work of art. The question is, of what constitutes that movement? How does the position in which the spectator finds himself approaching the work differ from the place he finds himself when he has been caught by its gaze? How it changes from being a seer, avid to feast his eyes on something, to being a picture beheld by a look that is irretrievably outside of himself. With Simon Critchley, the truth of art, according to Oscar Wilde's romantic aesthetics, is the incarnation of the inwardness of suffering in outward form, the expression of deep internality in externality. It is here that Wilde finds an intimate connection between the life of the artist and the life of Christ. War is unacceptable, says Richard Costellanis, because it is usually unnecessary. Entering the Vietnam War was a mistake. So has been the invasion to Iraq and, yes, Grenade. We know now that the Vietnam War was unnecessary because even though the communists won 3 decades ago, free enterprise triumphed since then in Indochina. For Jean-Luc Nancy, nudity is not truth. It is inquietude, anticipation, concern, and appeal all together. Perhaps also secrecy. The garment having been lifted, one must understand that everything remains to be discovered. Nudity is not closure, no, but the beginning of an initiation, a foundational opening to the search for truth through natural light. Kati Levovitz and me talk of Kohei Yoshiyuki's voyeur in the park. And this is not Lacan's voyeur that wants to be screamed at, caught by the police, thrown stones at. These voyeurs participate of the love scene. With Alain Badiou, it's Hegel, period, Kant, period, Lacan, period, from his last book, Logique des mondes. The translation in English is forthcoming. With you, Alain Badiou.
okay? So, some philosophical remarks concerning Marcel Duchamp. My departure point will be André Breton's text in 1922, consecrated to Duchamp in the 5th issue of the review Literature. In this text, Breton writes, I quote, "Could it be that Marcel Duchamp arrives more quickly than anyone else at the critical point of ideas?" Could it be that Marcel Duchamp arrives more quickly than anyone else at the critical point of ideas? Synthetically, Breton attributes to Duchamp once more the quality that everyone has attributed to him, an exceptional intelligence. This would be trivial if it was a psychological remark, but it's much more than that. What is in question, in fact, is a new relation between art and concept. That is, a new form of transgression of romanticism. Call romanticism the theory of a space between the quasi-divine or sacred poetic intuition of the infinite and the supposedly finite and sterile constraints of calculating rationality. Call romanticism, if you want, the distance between the artistical intuition and the work of art itself. In a totally explicit manner, Duchamp is a hero of an art that ignores this space. Duchamp creates against the entire theory of inspiration and genius. He despises the category of taste that classically constitutes the unity of artistic action. Two slogans are quite characteristic. Duchamp declares he made the famous ready-made. Why are you doing ready-made was the question. And Duchamp, the answer of Duchamp has been with no other intention except to discharge ideas. To discharge ideas, which is a mixture of something completely abstract and something completely sexual, in fact, to discharge ideas. And again, another quotation, I won't contradict myself in order to avoid conforming to my own taste. So we have here clearly something like a manifesto against romanticism. But it's the first stance of the statement of Breton. But Breton's statement must also be taken in detail. It can be analyzed as 5 abstract moments. First, art has become a question of movement, of what we get to rather than the abolition of this getting to, in a result, closed in the idolatrous cult of the work of art. Art is only the trace of its own action. Two, as a result of this vision of the work of art as a trace of its own action, as a result, the count procedures of movement are internal to art. Slowness and speed of execution are pertinent parameters. There is an immanent link between art and number. Three, maybe the most important, art treats a point of thought. A point of thought. The space-time it moves in, surfaces, supports, speed of execution, references, all this is only the envelope in which the point of thought is both exhibited and subtracted. It is the locus of the point. The surface of the work of art is in fact only the locus of the point, of a strict point of thought. The construction of the locus is toil, but this is so in order for the point to fulgurate. For this point is critical, but the point is critical in a dual sense. In the ordinary sense, because the idea of a point of thought criticizes in thought the theory of art, the ordinary theory of art, that is, ordinary romanticism. Romanticism supposes the infinite transcendence as the horizon and aim of the finitude of art. Romanticism rejects the number and science to the outside of its sacred action. Romanticism, it tends to reveal not in fact a pure point of thought, but something concerning the whole, something concerning the totality. That is the first sense for a critical point. But the point is critical in another sense, the sense it has in mathematics and physics. A point at which there is a qualitative discontinuity, such that at this same point there is indiscernibility at the same point between one state and another, which, however, differ absolutely every place else. Creating the locus at which anyone can reproduce the experience of such a critical point, and so of such an indiscernibility, would be the fundamental aim of art, to create the locus for a point where two different things are in fact indiscernible. At this point, we can say that the virtues of the conception of the infinite and the virtues of pure chance are exchanged. 5, this critical point is the visitation of the idea in its contemporary artistic form. For Duchamp, art is pure idea. It is not, as in vitalism, corporeal energy establishing the embrace of percepts and affects. It is not the continuous and projective passage from the experience of becoming to a living thought. It's on the contrary, the establishment of a locus, of course material, spatial, temporal, but at which the separation of the idea is experienced, and the fact that it can only touch the surface. The idea must only touch the surface, like a bird skims the sea. I return now to these 5 points, one by one. Art must become the trace of its own action. Art must be the place of its taking place. So, the work of art is self-sufficient. We must have art without any artist. Duchamp affirms the impersonality of artistic action. He argues against everything that brings into the becoming of the work the trace of a perceptive passivity. Everything he calls Retinian art, which goes back, according to him, to Courbet, and includes the Impressionists, the Fauves, and the Cubists too. He dreams of being totally absent from creation, of, I quote him, cutting off his hands. On the other hand, he gives detailed explanations of the process of the work. Fundamentally, he accompanies the object by something like a user's manual, that is, of its modes of fabrication, a lot of information on the work. The year before his death, speaking of the Grand Verre, the bright strip bear by bachelors even, he explains that in order to appreciate this work, which is, as you know, in Philadelphia today, it's absolutely necessary to follow the text he wrote, which is, he says, I quote Duchamp, a sort of diagrammatic and programmatic explanation of what can be seen on the glass. And the idea is naturally that without this reading, we cannot see what can be seen on the glass. And so, between the work itself, the result, the object, if you want, and the writing of explanation concerning the work, there is no difference. Second point, on the question of relationship between art and number, which is certainly a proposition absolutely opposite to Romanticism. I just remark that the fatal number for Duchamp is the 3. I quote, "The number 3 as 3, for me, is neither unity nor duality. The 3 is everything, the final end of numeration." Or again, 1 is unity, 2 is the double, and 3 is the rest. Duchamp works finally on a relation between the infinite and space or spaces, that is to say dimensions. A large part of the work of Duchamp concerns dimensions, but the final space is always 3-dimensional. This is why he can say, my last quotation concerning this point, millions do not count. The three fills the same role for me. So three is equal to millions. And this relationship between the work of art and the three is of great importance. Is not at all reducible to the question of the three dimensions of this concrete space. It's something else. It's something like the moment where the unity and the separation are the same. It's a new dialectical proposition concerning, in the work itself, the moment where we have the unity of something, but also the scission of something, and the moment where unity and separation are indiscernible precisely. Three, on the question of the point of thought. The point of thought whose work of art is the envelope or the place. There is a correlation in Duchamp between the refusal of all post-romantic sensitivity and the chance for a point of thought. The chance for a point of thought is the goal of the work, and it's also something which is a pure refusal of post-romantic sensitivity. There is, for Duchamp, a rationalism, a very strong and maybe sometimes cruel rationalism, turn against aesthetic idolatry. He goes so far as to say, in an interview of 1953, that, I quote, when we do things for the pure idea of functional reasoning, the idea of aesthetics disappears. When we do things for the pure idea of functional reasoning, the idea of aesthetics disappears. And in fact, it's the responsibility of the work of art as such to create the disappearing of the idea of aesthetics, and not at all the realization of this idea. What is the ready-made, after all? It is the exposed, although totally commonplace, envelope of the pure thought of choice or selection, with no subjective adhesion. The point of thought in the ready-made is that the choice, cut out of the commonplace, creates a pure point of indistinction between the commonplace and the supreme. Of course, there is a superior irony with respect to the envelope. The object that envelopes the point is particularly without particularity. Seeing it today, the snow shovel hung from the ceiling of a museum and surrounded by pious reverence is certainly comical. But the ascesis of Duchamp is there because the choice must be made without adhesion, and it's not easy. Duchamp says he must find, in choosing the object, I think, point of indifference of his own gaze. So we have to choose without any reason to choose. And you have to choose because you are in the position of a point of indifference, of a gaze. The ready-made is the envelope of the point where thought is reduced to a choice where we must find nothing except choosing itself. The ready-made exposes the choice of the choice as a cutout of the commonplace. This is why his title is itself the common name, Snow Shovel, and its situation in the artistical field, a pure signature. That is for the ready-made. The complex works of Duchamp now proceed, on the contrary, by the learned recollection, but with the same objective. You know, fundamentally, there is only two great complex works of Duchamp. Le Grand Verre, the Great Glass, the complete title is La mariée mise à nu par ses célibataires même. And étant donné, un, la chute d'eau, et deux, le gaz d'éclairage, given one waterfall and two, the gas light. There are in fact installations which already reproduce often as elements anterior productions of Duchamp. It's something like a recollection. Here, the envelope of the point of thought is the result of a very technical work, and in the opinion of Duchamp himself, it is very boring. We have in them a sort of maniacal craftsmanship. But why? Let us say for the moment, in order to exhibit a complexity, a great complexity, with exterior focal point is the point of the gaze. Do not forget that the Grand Verre is gigantesque transparent. And on the contrary, étant donné, given, is a Baroque exhibition that is closed and includes the terrible quarter nude and the blinking landscape that is seen through a hole in a door. In any case, the question of how we can see something like that is the question. How we can see something which is transparent, and across the thing we see something else, and how we can really see without being a horrible voyeur the nude, a nude female by a small hole in a door. And so, finally, the complexity is here the capture of the seeing. As the ready-made is the capture, the unconscious of Duchamp concerning women. Yes.
Tu sais, de dire un artiste que tu aimes.
Un artiste que j'aime? Oh, it's so many. It's not a distribution of prices. No. A contemporary artist.
So they're making that you love.
Anselm Kiefer.
I had a question about the place of repetition in your approach to Duchamp. when you spoke of Duchamp trying to, attempting in his artistic practice to approach a pure, anonymous gesture, a pure, anonymous, indifferent choice. I believe you said that this necessarily, or seems to necessarily, give rise to a practice of repetition. You then said that there was something perverse about Duchamp's practice of repetition and of copies. You made this remark in passing a little bit. I wonder if you could expand on what you meant precisely by perverse in your description of Duchamp's practice of repetition.
Perverse. No, I think it's always the same thing concerning Duchamp. We have to recognize a very lucid contradiction, something like that. A very the self-consciousness of something which is contradictory. Because first, if the work of art, if art is dead, in fact, if art is dead, and if art is dead because it has to be confused or involved by ordinary life, if art is nothing else than a possibility of something which illustrates pure decision or something which objectives pure seeing. Okay. If all that is true, the question of repetition is only the repetition of all that. So if pure decision is possible, the very nature of a pure decision is that you can repeat the pure decision. You cannot repeat only if you have something which is too singular to be repeated. Yeah? So if the choice of an object, this one, for example, is really the product of my pure singularity, when Josefina takes the bottle, it's not repetition, actually, because she does not repeat my intention and the true signification of my taking of the bottle. So we can perfectly understand that the idea of Duchamp is to produce something which can be repeated as a proof that it's really something indifferent. Because if the bottle of the snow shovel is very important for Duchamp, we cannot repeat, because if we take the shovel, it's not the same gesture. But after that, we have something like a game organized by Duchamp concerning the repetition. Because he becomes the master of repetition. But in fact, it's contradictory to the idea of the anonymous repetition. For example, there's no reason for Duchamp to be the man who says if the copy is good or not. Duchamp returns to the classical figure of the master, which is the only person able to say that is true, that is my work, and that is not my work. And that is the good snow shovel, and that is not the good snow shovel. And that is perverse, certainly, because it's a reconstruction of the figure of the master when, theoretically, this figure is excluded. And we can name perversion the game between presence and absence, fetishism, finally, organized as a repetition, but as a repetition with a master of the repetition. And it is why all this very complicated game with repetition, copies, miniatures, and so on, and he was playing to that with himself too, but also with many others. But perversion is not an accusation. He's not guilty. But he's complex. And the complexity, finally, is a contradiction between, which is a classical contradiction of contemporary art, in my sense, beginning with Mallarmé or something like that, beginning at the end of the 19th century, which is a dream of pure impersonality of artistic creation. The work is done without an artist, without subjectivity. And on the other side, finally, there is something absolutely singular, absolutely original. So it's the destiny of the idea of originality during the last century. And with a very striking fact that originality is on one side excluded, and on the other side, much more important than ever. Yes? Yes.
I'm a regular abstract painter, and I'm much involved just in my own unique expression, which I suppose is completely contradictory to Duchamp's impersonal approach. But I love Duchamp anyway because I got ideas from him that I could use. For instance, when he dropped that 1 meter rope and it made this random coiling, and he photographed that, I got an idea for a series of very highly personal paintings. So I kind of delighted in having maybe subverted his philosophy in a way by using it this way. So for that reason, I love Duchamp.
Yes, yes. You know, naturally, you are saying that you find in Duchamp not only new ideas, but new means, finally. New means. You find in Duchamp a sort of opening of the field of contemporary art. And I agree with you, naturally. I agree, but when I say that I don't love Duchamp, it is not on. It's another question, if you want. I recognize, as you, all the virtues of Duchamp, its inventions, its extraordinary events in the becoming of art, the new ways he opens, and so. But I am not a painter. Okay? I have not the same reasons as you to recognize all that. But I don't really love the result, the Duchamp result of all that. Maybe I prefer the use of Duchamp by some others than Duchamp. It's the use of Duchamp by Duchamp which is my problem.
Deborah had a question. Okay.
You know, I was reminded when you were talking of sort of images of actually physics, resolution of the objects. And in terms of the touche, I just wanted to ask a sort of practical question. When the locus, when touche occurs, is the locus then sort of changed then forever? I mean, is it constantly changed as the touche occurs? And is that, don't know, perhaps the basis of a copy, or that the copy is not the same, or, I mean, when the chance or a probability that the touche occurs, and then is the object then changed? Is the locus changed, or is it can't stay the same, or anyway, I think of this thing as the focus, the thought, all right, and the locus, and if the probability that they touche, and then is that then change the locus?
Yes, you know, the question, it's a question of the relationship in Duchamp, after Duchamp, of the locus and the change and the modifications. And it's a very complex problem because in Duchamp we have the idea that that the relationship between the envelope and the point of thought is only something like a touching, something like and also that we have to indicate the trace of all of that. And so this is also the relationship between the thing and the trace. It's the Derridean definition of Duchamp, something concerning the trace, architrace, and so on. And so certainly we have a change of the locus itself, but the change is not the change as an envelope of the point of thought, but a change because we have to inscribe in the work of art the trace of its own development. And so, you know, you have necessarily two levels, two different levels in something which is made by Duchamp. You are the construction of the locus, the general construction of the locus first, and we have some inscriptions, some touch on the surface, but they are different. We have some things which are properly I don't find the word, something like what inhabits the locus, what is really in the locus, and something else which is the trace of the movement itself of the modification. And it is why it's something very complex and something generally we cannot understand without explanations. And so it's the beginning also of something which is difficult for me. And that is the work of art which is not understandable without explanations. Explanations of its movement, of its becoming, naturally. But it's an idea of Duchamp. So the process of the work has to be in the work itself. And when it's not understandable, we have to write the understanding, and you have the process of the fabrication. And it's very interesting, in fact. When we buy some new machine, we have the rules of use of the machine. And Duchamp precises that it's not the use, it's not the rule of the use of the machine, it's the rule of its fabrication. And why? It's because there is no use at all. What is the use of Le Grand Verre, or when you see in the hall the terrible nude? There is no use. It's the seizure, the capture of your seeing, or the capture of your idea of decision. There is no use. So you have to understand the fabrication. It's exactly as you buy something which has no use at all, but you have a great paper to explain the fabrication of the thing. I do like the bullet, matches, paintings, and so on. But why all that? No use at all. And it's a very profound idea of something which is identical to its process of fabrication. Yes?
In the construction of the value of the artwork as being conceptual, I've read some of his notes, and he keeps referring to the fourth dimension. And I was wondering, and that it might actually return there to some kind of romanticism, but I don't know.
Duchamp parlait de la quatrième dimension.
Oui, oui, oui.
Et ensuite, c'est une dimension mystique, je sais pas, j'ai pas.
Oui, dimension mystique, ça j'ai compris.
He keeps referring to the fourth dimension in his
La
notes.
dimension dans ses notes.
And by the fact that we know that the value of the artwork is conceptual,
Je conseille à l'heure de l'œuvre est conceptuelle.
is he striving for the conceptual to become mystical?
Est-ce qu'il espère que le conceptuel devient donc mystique?
Oui. No, it's a very profound and difficult question. In fact, the question of the fourth dimension and so on. My understanding of all that is that we have three dimensions concerning, in fact, the creation of what I name the envelope or the surface of the work. And it's not only because it's in space, it's more general. There, three is the number of the multiplicity as such for Duchamp. So you have three dimensions because you have to do something which is a multiplicity, something which is composed. And the fourth dimension is the point itself, the point which is not reducible to the multiplicity which is the envelope. What I name the point of thought, of the critical point, to speak as Breton. The critical point or the point of thought is something which is inside the three dimensions, but not, but like a fourth dimension, and not inside the three dimensions themselves. Alors, this point, I think there is an hesitation of Duchamp concerning the status of this point. Sometimes there is, in fact, something mystical. I agree with you. There is something mystical because the point is so in an other space than the space where it is, that we are very near an experience of something which is presented in the three dimensions, but which is transcendent in regard to the three. Sometimes it's a purely materialist determination. The point is there. The point is something like a pure touch of the surface. And I think maybe the hesitation of Duchamp is also the hesitation between the way of ready-made, but the way of great and complex construction and so on. It's a divided subject, Duchamp, and the pure rationalist in one sense, but with something mystical in another sense, in the conception of the aim of the work of art. The last.
I was, when you first started talking, you were saying that for Duchamp, art was pure idea, and so it wasn't about presence or importance of presence and aura. And we've all read that famous article. So I was wondering what you thought about the relationship with those two guys. Like, if there's a contradiction there, you know, or I don't know if maybe there's some way to resolve those two kinds of, you know, approaches to art.
J'ai à peu près compris. Walter Benjamin.
Vous parliez de l'idée pure chez Duchamp, et puis chez Benjamin, Laura, et
Oui.
est-ce qu'il y a un moyen de réconcilier ces deux approches?
Oui, I think it's the same in intellectual context. Certainly there is big differences, and we cannot reduce the conception of Duchamp to the conception of Benjamin for many reasons. Because there is something much near calculating in Duchamp than in Benjamin, which is more prophetic, if you want. There is quelque chose more precise, but in the question of what is the present in temporality is the same question. But maybe it's a great question of all the last century, and not only of Benjamin and Duchamp. What is our present? What is our present? And it was a question, why? It was a question because the last century has been haunted by the idea of a rupture, of something new, of something which happens. Rupture in the great definition of the forms of art, political rupture and so on, revolution. It was the century of the change, of the radical change. But if you are under the idea of the radical change, what is your conception of the present, of something which really is here? And there is maybe a contradiction between the idea of a constant change, of the newness of all things, and the desire of the present, the desire of something here. And I think that this tension is in Duchamp himself. And the creation of Duchamp are sometimes something which is exposed to complete change, repetition, transformation, and so on. But sometimes it's something which is closed in its singularity. Étant donné, given, is a pure example of something which is absolutely irrepeatable, which cannot be done another time. And so it's a pure present. It's a present that we can just see. Thank you.